All right, welcome everyone to the July 13th special board meeting. We go ahead and call the roll, please.
Becker,
Here.
McCoy,
Here.
Lyerly,
Here.
Minnow,
Here.
Knell,
Here.
Meister,
Here.
Yang.
Here.
All right, with that, we will move directly into our action items to get us started here. Can I have somebody read the motion for item 2A, employment of staff?
Sure. I move that the employment of staff as presented be approved.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
All right, we'll move on to item 2B, transfer of staff. Can someone read the motion?
I move that the transfer of staff as presented be approved.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
All right, and that takes us to item 2C, retirement of staff. Would someone read the motion?
I move that the retirement of staff as presented be approved.
Second.
Discussion? All right, Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
And finally, that brings us to item 2D, resignation of staff.
I move that the resignation of staff as presented be approved.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, Kinsey?
Online voting is now open. All votes have been entered and the motion is carried with all board members voting in favor.
All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
It's like the voice of God.
Yes.
Aye. All right, we are adjourned. And we are officially moving into our July 13th Board of Education work session. So welcome everyone to that. And Kinsey, would you please call the roll?
Yang.
Here.
Meister.
Here.
Knell.
Here.
Minnow.
Here.
Lyerly.
Here.
McCoy.
Here.
Becker.
Here.
All right, thank you, everyone. We are also joined at the table tonight by two of our student representatives. So if you would like to introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Gwen. I'm a junior at Preble.
Thank you for joining us this evening, and please feel free to participate in the discussion. All right. We are also joined here this evening by our new superintendent, Mr. Michael Hernandez. So welcome to the table.
Thank you very much.
All right. With that, we will move into our public forum. Did we have any? No one registered? All right. If we have no one registered to speak, we will move right into item 3A, our strategic planning update.
Good evening, board and student leaders. Appreciate the opportunity this evening to share with you a brief update on some data related to our strategic goal of thriving student body, but a more extensive update on some really significant actions that are aligned with the board's focus on ensuring that we're sending out into the world students who are multilingual. As I network throughout the state and sometimes even in spaces throughout the country, this commitment that our board has made to developing and building up programs to establish multilingual learners who leave our district is always accepted widely as a bold step. And it's one that is appreciated in all settings where I engage. One of the things that's an immediate recognition of multilingualism and no small feat unto itself is earning the seal of biliteracy. And this is a time of year where we have fresh data to share in terms of the end of this school year and where we are relative to students who have earned that seal. I used to say awarded that seal, and that's the wrong way to talk about it because it is absolutely something earned. It is not something awarded. So just to review briefly, the strategic goal set forth by this board is that by 2030, at least 12% of our students will graduate with proficiency in multiple languages. In looking closely at our data, establishing a baseline, we saw that we were over 10.5% already toward that 12% figure. So when I come to the board in August with kind of a refresh look ahead at the next year of our strategic plan work, you're going to see that goal actually increase because we believe that a 5-year trajectory can actually get us well beyond 12%. Also a reminder that the seal of biliteracy alone is not the only way that we recognize multilingualism. It's a little complex, and the team presented to you back in the winter what this actually looks like. The seal of biliteracy clearly is an external recognition of multilingualism. We also look for students who have earned B's or higher in post-secondary English and world language classes, as well as scoring at the meeting or advanced level on the ACT for English language arts. So just a message as I share the seal of biliteracy data that is one component of multilingualism, but not the sole component of that. So looking at our data as we wrap up year one, 24-25 presented a baseline, an opportunity for us to see 30 students earning the seal across all 4 of our comprehensive high schools. As we move into this past year, we have a slight increase in those numbers of students. We also have a broader distribution of those students across the schools as well, and both are important. And so as we continue in the work ahead, we'll be seeking to elevate that number. Milwaukee just closed out their school year with 125 recipients of the seal of biliteracy, and I'm accepting that challenge. We can do this. So you see a slight increase and again, a distribution across schools. The other thing to mention about the seal of biliteracy and the recipients of this, those who earn this, is that the vast majority of them began their experience in Green Bay Area Public Schools in our bilingual programming. And as we talk about strategic actions that are aligned with the board's goal for multilingualism, clearly a focus on building up, expanding, improving, critically appraising our bilingual program are all very important so that more and more our students can enter in with the kind of challenge and support that comes along with bilingual education. I would like to invite to the board table 2 of our consultant partners who've been actively involved this past year in supporting the work as Doty Elementary opens as a newly consolidated school with the Langlade community joining them with a renewed and revitalized 2-way bilingual program. You met Dr. Villarreal and Ms. Garcia almost a year ago exactly when they introduced themselves and shared the vision for the partnership that has now really come to a meaningful point in time where we are ready to open a kindergarten classroom at Doty Elementary that is a 2-way bilingual program that is different than what we've had in the past and has a vision for growth and success that is far more focused now because of our partners' involvement. So I'd like to call them to the table and they will share a presentation that culminates a year worth of partnership with us and also charts us on the road ahead for more and more multilingual students. Welcome, Dr. Villarreal and Ms. Garcia. I got to switch here.
Yep, that one's working.
Okay, yeah, this one is working. Good evening, President and members of the board, and thank you for your time tonight as we present our report toward bilingual excellence, bilingual minds, and boundless potential, mentes bilingües, potencial sin límites. I am Grazia Villarroel, and I am here with Amanda Garcia, who is the Executive Director of Casa Alva Melanie. What we are bringing here tonight is the culmination of phase one, the vision phase of a two-way dual language program at Doty Elementary. We want to be clear from the outset that this has been a genuinely collaborative effort. Over the past 9 months, we worked closely with GBAP's multilingual learner team, including Director Julie Seefeld and Associate Director Jen Tremblay, who are here today, and with the Doty Langlet School leadership and under the district leadership of David Johns, Associate Superintendent of Continuous School Improvement. The vision we are presenting is the collective thinking of our team. Our theme captures the heart of it: bilingual minds, boundless potential, mentes bilingües, potencial sin límites.
All right, this is working. Thanks to the Board of Education for allowing us to present today. Congratulations to Superintendent Hernandez. We're really excited for your vision with the school district. Before we go further, we want to frame clearly what this project is and isn't. This is not a new program, and it is not new to the district. It is a reframing and a reimagining of the bilingual education program that has been offered since 1994. We are not starting from zero. We are building upon 3 decades of institutional knowledge, community relationships, hard-won experience with bilingual education across many schools. What we are proposing is an investment in 5 things that the board already cares about: academic excellence, student success, family engagement, workforce readiness, and preparing every student for a multilingual and multicultural world. Throughout our work, we kept returning to one question: what does it take to build a bilingual program that is not only academically strong, but is also culturally rooted, community-centered, and sustainable within the realities of this district?
Okay, well, now we move to what is a 50-50 two-way program. Let us define the model plainly, because it really is important to be precise here. In a two-way dual language model, native English speakers and native Spanish speakers learn together side by side, with about half instruction delivered in each language. The goal is full bilingualism, biliteracy, and genuine cross-cultural competence, with both languages treated as academic assets rather than one as a subject and the other as a deficit. We want to reassure the board directly on scope. This launches a single kindergarten classroom at Doty. Doty remains a neighborhood school, and no local family is displaced by this program. And the building itself is becoming genuinely multilingual with English, Spanish, and American Sign Language all under one roof, because the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program from Langley joins the new bilingual program in the consolidated school. The combination will make Doty one of the most linguistically rich elementary settings in our region.
This chart is the reason we're all here tonight. It shows the Latino share of the Green Bay District enrollment from 1990 to 2025, drawn from DPI WiseDash. In 1990, Latino students were 1% of the district, meaning about 213 children. Between 1990 and 2010, that number grew to 4,380 students, a roughly 20-fold increase. By September of 2025, Latino students made up 35.4% of the district, or more than 1 in 3. We want the board to hold two trends together because their combination is the real story. The share climbed even as the total district enrollment fell from 20,365 students in 2010 to 17,954 in 2025. In a very real sense, the Latino community has sustained this district's enrollment through a period of overall decline. This is not a peripheral subgroup. It is the district's defining growth community, and it has been for more than 30 years.
In the last slide, if the last slide showed the whole district, this one shows where the change is most concentrated. Two numbers tell it all. First, among our multilingual learners, Spanish-dominant students have risen from just 3% in 1990 to 78% today. That is not a gradual demographic drift. It is a structural transformation of who our multilingual learners are. Second, this is a number we could ask you to remember. Roughly 1 in 2 of this year's kindergarten cohort is Latino. We found out that the number is actually 40.2%. But if you add multiracial students, sometimes that can go up to 50%. So when we design a 50-50 program, we are not artificially balancing two populations. We are mirroring children who are already walking through the kindergarten door. Designing for biliteracy is simply designing for the students that the district already serves.
So what did we learn throughout this project? Our vision was shaped by 3 voices or 3 stakeholder groups, which we felt were very important to this visioning process. And we took the time to listen carefully to all 3. Families told us what they value most is belonging, relationships, culture, honest and consistent communication in a language that they understand. The national research told us that high-quality bilingual programs produce stronger literacy, higher academic achievement, greater cognitive flexibility, and better long-term outcomes. And our educators or teachers shared that implementation requires a couple things. It requires competent bilingual teachers, protected planning time for those teachers, and sustained professional development. We also learned from practitioners directly through 2 expert panels of parents and bilingual teachers from established programs, both in the Madison School District and in the Cicero, Illinois School District, coordinated by Carrie Scapolato. Their real-world experience confirmed that the challenges we anticipated are common, both nationally and solvable with the right supports.
Okay, now we'd like to explain why the two-way dual language model works. We want to be precise about the research and not just be enthusiastic about this. The national research record on two-way dual language is consistent and compelling when it is built with fidelity. It is the most equitable and the most effective bilingual model available. It is not a quick fix. It takes 6 or more years of instruction to reach true biliteracy. which is why commitment to the full pathway matters so much. And critically, it produces strong academic gains for both groups, English dominant and Spanish dominant students alike. Students who complete 6 or more years of high quality dual language instruction have been shown across multiple studies to outperform comparable peers in monolingual programs on assessments in both languages. This is a proven model, not an experiment.
With that as the foundation, we want to share the 7 principles that we believe should define the DoDI program. And we developed these collaboratively with the core team in our final visioning session.
And these are the 7 core characteristics. They are drawn from research and from stakeholder input, and each one aligns directly with the district's strategic plan. First, champion biliteracy, biculturalism, and language pride so that both languages are visible and valued from the first day of kindergarten. Second, protect balanced instructional time in both languages because fidelity to the balance is the single clearest predictor of biliteracy outcomes. Third, cultivate belonging-centered classrooms since students learn best when their identities and families are reflected in the classroom. Fourth, integrate families as genuine partners, not passive recipients of translated notices. Fifth, ground instruction in developmentally appropriate practices for young children. Sixth, build strategic community and cultural partnerships. And seventh, invest in strong bilingual teacher preparation and ongoing development. The through line across all 7 is that quality and equity are designed in the form from the very beginning, not added later. So then we have the 5 major findings. Alongside these design principles, 5 findings emerged consistently across our research, our discussions with the core team, and both expert panels. Amanda will walk you through them because they shape everything in our recommendation.
Our 5 findings. First was that recruitment and messaging are foundational. I remember there was a key point throughout the visioning project where we really started working hand in hand with district staff to make sure that this was happening. How we talk about this program directly shapes enrollment, balance, and sustainability. Second, teachers are the single most important investment throughout this whole process. Every session, every panelist, every study pointed to the same conclusion. The quality and stability of the bilingual teaching team will determine whether this program succeeds. Third, family engagement must be structural, as we said, built into the design of the program and not offered as an occasional event or program throughout the year. Fourth, and we want to emphasize this one, that the district is not starting from zero. You're starting with decades of bilingual experience, institutional knowledge, and community relationships to build on. And fifth, today's climate calls for messaging that leads with academic excellence. The goal is not to abandon our equity values, but to express them in language that resonates with every family, because every family wants their child to be academically strong, globally capable, and confident. So what does success look like? Our recommendations cluster into 6 priorities, which reflect some of our findings. Recruitment and messaging that reaches both English dominant and Spanish dominant families with equal urgency and equal resources. Equity guardrails that protect access and program integrity. Early investment in bilingual staffing and professional development, including hiring teacher pairs before the first day with protected planning time written into their schedules. A real family engagement structure with bilingual communication as the baseline standard. Intentional attention to school culture through the Doty and Langlade merger, which I know is happening as we speak in real time, so that both communities feel honored and they're sharing a single identity as they come together. Clear structures for data, evaluation, and continuous improvement so that we can see what is working, correct what isn't early on, and build knowledge that survives staff turnover.
So the equity commitment. This is at the heart of what you came to say today. Equity outcomes in dual language programs do not happen automatically. The national research is clear that when a 50-50 program is designed to attract English dominant families, access for Spanish dominant families can narrow over time unless the program is built to prevent it. We do not raise this to assign blame. We raise it because naming a structural tension clearly is the precondition for addressing it, and because the core team showed genuine commitment to equity throughout our work together. The answer is straightforward: explicit guardrails, continuous data review, and public accountability. Those protections keep the program centered on Latino families whose advocacy made it possible in the first place. And the simplest, most important commitment of all this, Doty remains a genuine neighborhood school. That single promise anchors everything else.
And we've been talking a lot about the strategic plan because we know that this is your guiding document, your guiding North Star as you work through all of the district goals. We want to connect this program directly to the board's own strategic plan for 2025 to 2030 because the alignment shouldn't just be accidental. It advances all 4 of your priorities: academic excellence through biliteracy and literacy, and as one of the most promising interventions for reducing the disproportionality this plan commits to cutting: a thriving student body through belonging and identity, which research links directly to bilingual education for Latino students; a thriving workforce through bilingual teacher development and a grow your own pipeline; a family and community engagement structure through the bilingual family infrastructure we developed through this process, which the district can adapt for every school with significant multilingual populations. It is also one of the most direct pathways to the board's own goal that at least 12% of graduates be proficient in multiple languages by 2030, which we heard from David Johns. We would be honest with you in saying that a single kindergarten class will not achieve these goals on its own, but it can be the start or an anchor of a pipeline that will continue to develop over time.
So we want to discuss what success looks like. We want to leave you with a picture of what a few years down the road could look like. It looks like students reading, writing, and speaking confidently in 2 languages. It looks like families who feel welcomed and valued and not merely accommodated. It looks like strong, lasting partnerships between school and the community. It looks like highly prepared bilingual educators who stay, supported by the planning time and professional development they need. And it looks like a program that is sustainable, one that grows steadily over time and becomes permanent part of the district's identity rather than depending on any one champion. And in closing, we believe that the Doty program is the right next step for this district. It honors the linguistic and cultural assets already present in our community, and it positions the Green Bay Area Public Schools as a statewide leader in bilingual education. We are grateful for the partnership of the core team throughout these 9 months and for the leadership of the Associate Superintendent David Johns and the multilingual learner team.
In addition, we want to extend our sincere gratitude to our expert panelists who supported throughout this process, coordinated by Carrie Scapolato, our community partners, the families that this district serves, whose experience enriched every part of this work. So we just want to say thank you, gracias, and we would be happy to take any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. It was wonderful. Any comments, questions? We'll start over on the side. Andrew.
Yeah, thank you.
What is the model going to, like, what's the, well, starting in kindergarten, what is the distribution of instruction going to be roughly of the two languages?
It should be around 50-50, but I think that is a question that maybe David Johns would like to answer. Oops, it's not working. Do you
This
want?
one works.
Okay, I think this works. We're getting an answer to that question because currently by grade level, that varies. I'm going to call Julie Seafelt. Thank you for being here. And you heard Mr. Becker's question, yes? We'll share that.
50-50 kindergarten through fifth grade right now. What David was talking about is in different grades, the subject area may change. So for example, in kindergarten for second, they may be a little bit more time in math and Spanish, and then less time in social studies science, but then that evens out. In fourth and fifth grade, there may be more time in math, but within that classroom, 50% in English, 50% in Spanish.
Okay, so we're not gonna have the thing that we had some years ago where there was a cliff edge in third grade.
No, no.
Okay, because that was an unfortunate thing about an otherwise really good program. It threw some people off. And I like the
Yeah.
the 50-50. In one of the years ago, my son Isaiah actually did try the 50-50. Or no, not the because it wasn't 50-50. That's why he didn't keep doing it. But the Annie Jackson School had something. He did that, and he enjoyed it, but it was I think it was 80-20 Spanish, and that was just a little bit too much. So I'm glad to hear that it's more balanced here. I think that'll work well for and not saying that you're counting minutes, but if you're going in with the 50-50 concept, I think that's great. So
Andrew, if I could just address
Yeah.
the one question when you talked about, I think you called it the cliff. So that was the SLA model, the Spanish language acquisition model.
Yeah.
And that was in fourth grade and fifth grade, the students went down to 20%.
Yep.
We are phasing that out. So next year, that will not be in a third grade, fourth grade. It will only be in fifth grade. Our hope is then through the staffing process next year, that fifth grade will be eliminated of that as well. And it would be 50-50.
Thank you.
Alex?
These new mics are crazy. My first question is, over the last year, and even maybe from your own experiences prior, what can you tell us that you've learned from the Latino families, or at least some of them that have left the different, some of our older versions of the dual language program at some of the schools that we've had over years, where it started out with higher numbers, and then, there was different reasons that people left, but they left at different times over the years, and those numbers drastically reduced depending on the school and the year. What can you tell us that, if anything, that you've learned from why those families made that decision, and what we can do to obviously, hopefully prevent that and this go around as we reimagine this?
The people who leave our district generally are not going to other districts for bilingual programming, because we are truly the only district around here who offers that. As a public district, there is a private school district that does offer bilingual programming, and they do have sites well within our district in central locations. So we have seen a number of students take advantage of the vouchers and attend private schools.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nope, you're good.
Oh, the research also shows, though, that a lot of Latino families do really want their children to learn Spanish, even if they did not. So you might get a family where the parents don't speak Spanish, but they really do want their children to speak Spanish. So retaining the language is growing among the Latino population.
Yeah, I just wanted to slightly clarify my question, and you may not have the answer just based on circumstance of maybe your roles at a time in the past. But there was a decline in people that stayed within our district, but just left the bilingual program. Even before some of the voucher programs and some of those schools were able to restart it and really get that going. So I guess I would say, without maybe that potential information, it might be a little thing for us to maybe focus on and maybe get some more information if there's a way to reach out to some of those families, or even ones that maybe just don't even have an interest and understand why. Because again, I think that could help provide useful perspective to how we engage those families, and make sure that one, they find value in it, and two, they can see maybe what we're going to do different this time for those that maybe are aware of that or have friends or families are aware, but now they have kids coming through, and we might want to give them a new reason to believe in what we're going to do.
Sorry, I misunderstood your
That's okay.
question. I do have one little answer that I do have is we do lose some students out of the bilingual programming from fifth grade into sixth grade. That is because not all 4 of our middle schools do offer bilingual programming. So sometimes students do not want to go to their non-neighborhood middle school. That's a tough time to begin with. And now I'm going to a middle school where my neighborhood friends don't attend. So 2 out of our 4 comprehensive middle schools offer bilingual programming.
James.
Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to make sure that I understand this report and how it intersects with some of our existing bilingual programming. And I think that the distinction is that this is a request to return to a 50-50 program versus the bilingual programming that we have in place now. So I think this question is for David. You may be best positioned to answer it, but reading through the report and hearing the presentation tonight, there's a request for some governance structures that I think are more aligned with specialty program. I think the term program was used tonight, and the term pathway was both of those we used tonight. And then there's also the concept of, but the school itself, leave it as a neighborhood school. And so I maybe I don't understand the tension there, but do we have other examples within the district where we have a program within a school and we don't, whether it's support or encourage open enrollment into that program, if you understand what I'm saying? Because that's where I kind of got lost in the presentation of keeping it a neighborhood school, but introducing a pathway in that neighborhood school. Could that be explained?
I'll try. What I'm hearing, I think, speaks to the tension that Dr. Villarreal brought up in the report, and that was occasionally when districts have programming and they're struggling to hit enrollment targets to keep them operating at a high level. We start to invoke things like, well, now let's turn this into a magnet and bring everybody from everywhere around in to fill spots. We know that with this positioned in the Doty Langley neighborhood community, there are enough students to keep a thriving two-way program going. And it's on us to continue to tap into that energy, that neighborhood community for the program to stay strong. We have had instances, and this may relate to your question, Mr. Minow, where families have begun bilingual programming in one school, and after a couple of years, we've changed the location. There's a significant amount of busing that's taking place right now for our bilingual students, which again, what I hope we can get better at is being precise and engaging neighborhood communities so that more and more these exist in neighborhood schools.
Can I follow quick, Sam? Just so that I can make sure that I understand. So if this is specific programming targeting a particular school, what is the ask of the board? at this point. We have some existing programming around bilingual education. So when we move from visioning to operating this program, and what I hear is a piece of that starts this fall, right? With the introduction of a kindergarten class, if I read correctly. So we've gone from visioning to this. So what is it that the board is being called to decide or approve out there? Because I do think the board should govern the creation of some of these extra governance protocols where they want a parental advisory group that, let me to summarize, has teeth. I think is a good way to put what I think the proposal is, that they really have influence in the programming out there. So can you sum up or articulate what you're asking us to do?
The ask isn't specific as much as it is more general, understanding that as we get programs off the ground and have conversations in the year ahead around things like class size, staffing ratio, different things like that, there'll be implications as we work to grow this up. Staffing models, additional days for work for the individuals to experience the professional development. We also, based on the recommendations, are envisioning this as a incubator of sorts or a lab school of sorts for aspiring bilingual educators to come and learn on site. And so those are things that may or may not intersect with board policy, but there will be some structural things and there will be some things related to resources that inevitably are part of supporting something getting off the ground.
All right, Alex.
If I may, part of my comment and maybe response might also help a couple of the things you asked, James. I'm not sure, but obviously David and we've had some extensive conversations over the last year on some of this with me and my teaching background and my daughter's experience in the bilingual programs, particularly even at Doty. So the one-way program, as it's sometimes phrased, is also, that's in part where some of this is coming from, is the change from that model being the only option at Doty to focusing on a two-way dual language model. And the other thing related to your initial question is also with the one way, because of the capability to offer that only at certain schools, that naturally has meant kids coming from all around the city to access a one-way bilingual program, which has been the only one that was available at Doty, and because it wasn't available at other places. So that's kind of taking care of keeping the community school concept by also having a different model, but also one which focuses on the goals of, biliteracy, and also replacing a different version of a dual language model that we initially talked about that maybe wasn't the best model. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but I just wanted to kind of share that part.
Can I add just one point? I think one of the reasons why we are concerned about Doty Elementary as a community school is because before the merger, Doty was a majority Latino school, and Langley was it was a majority white school. So when you are putting them together, you just to make sure that you do not, take Latino students to displace Latino students because of wanting to attract white students from the entire district or from other districts. So that is the concern, to be able to keep the 50-50 model. But there is enough people and enough students in the district and in that location to be able to keep the 50-50 model.
And if I can frame the question slightly different, if we reframe the question to be why Doty and why now at this point in time in the district, echoing what Grazia said, Doty was already about 58% Latino, and it was among the stronger performing schools in the district with this type of population. The building is also being expanded through the voter approved referendum. As we mentioned, it's going to be consolidated with Langlade. And there is an incoming DHH program, which makes it multilingual. When we started this visioning project, that was one of the first questions we asked. Why are we doing this visioning or revamping of this program at this point in time? And to kind of paraphrase the conversation, it was we have the right people in place. We have the right split of students to be able to keep and sustain this program and to have forward momentum.
Other questions or comments? Go ahead, Mary.
I really like this 50-50 dual language. I think it's, being bilingual myself, I think this is actually a really great opportunity for all the kiddos. And the inclusivity for the parents that may or may not speak the language too. So, I'm all for parent engagement as well, because I think that's one of the key success for our students here. I'm excited to see how our data in 2030 looks like. Thank you so much for working on this, guys.
Thank you.
Yep, go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, ladies, for doing this. I think that one other part that is important to know is, as Doty being a community-based school, the opportunities of being able to do some evening events, in which it possibly be, whether it's ESL classes or whether it is Spanish for English speakers, to help build more of a community feel within. So that was one. The second one is, during my transition time, I have sat down and talked with, because Alex, I've asked that question about why some of our families have left, whether it is leaving our district to go to possibly a voucher school or from just leaving. And the one thing that I was impressed with and that I appreciated was the call for the partnership with families. In any research that you look through, families that are actively engaged within schools then leads to actively engaged students. So it becomes that learning partnership, but it's also just honoring culture. And I think that that is what I've been told as if we are looking at whether it's the 50-50, in Illinois, I was in the 80-20 model, and in Madison, we did 90-10, we did 75-25 going through. The key is consistency. The key is, in which I appreciate when we look at doing, whether it's content split and such, I'm thinking of both the technical and the adaptive language that's being used. You're able to utilize both conversational English and academic English, conversational Spanish and academic Spanish, in which then builds on that foundation between, and you have a room full of mere models. And that doesn't happen often, and that's what leads to success, is having mere models. So thank you.
Thank you. Very good.
James?
Yeah, I appreciate it. So I don't know if Andrew might be the best person to answer this question or not, because it speaks to the origin of our current bilingual and our previous bilingual programs. Did the board have a role in establishing or approving, and I'm going to use the wrong word, but I'm going to use a charter document for those initiatives? The reason why I ask is we did for Leonardo da Vinci, right? And it means that, if there's significant change being requested there, my perspective is that decision elevates to the board to make sure that we haven't inadvertently changed the charter of that program. And to speaking to what the request of the board is, I would recommend that if we're starting a program on the cost profile of a single kindergarten class, but we well know that that cost profile is going to change, we are purposely going to change that over the course of our, let's set a horizon for our current strategic plan. I would like to see some proposals as to what the costs are, and kind of make sure that we all go in and understand what we're committing to, because this is good stuff, right? And I want to make a commitment to the community based on an understanding of what we really are talking about. So I would prefer, David, that it not be, hey, we will come to the board with some resourcing decisions here or there and put together a plan that says, here's what this program means to the community and to the budget conversations that we have annually, and I'd hate for it to get lost in white noise, right?
If you ask me, I think it was probably closer to probably along the lines of a curriculum adoption level thing. It was, it was acknowledged, it was voted on, resources, resource allocation, and not deeper than that, I don't think.
I wonder if that's a model that we all appreciate, or if we would prefer that something, I guess, more concrete be put in place to govern the program.
Other comments, thoughts, Alex?
So I have a couple thoughts. So kind of what Andrew alluded to, being in the district at the time and teaching Spanish and being part of some of the bilingual conversations and going to some of the bilingual schools with some of the curriculum work we were doing. Previous district leadership essentially just decided to make a curriculum switch to more or less focus on English language acquisition. Not only the SLA model was brought about, but it also included switching the emphasis within the percentage, like Andrew alluded to, as kids move through the elementary level. So to your kind of reinforced question, and I'll tie in my question and my thought as well. This is more or less a change in, there's not necessarily automatically a concrete ask, because we're kind of just changing the model, but we still more or less are still doing a bilingual program. So I don't know that and I'm not trying to make a decision. I'm just saying I understand why David doesn't have the concrete, hey, this is what because it's not necessarily making a hard ask for anything new per se. It's kind of, for layman's terms, reverting back to an older original model and a better model, quite frankly. But then to tie in my question, and this is where I think you've alluded to, and my experience shows this is probably the fundamental part, at least in our district's history, is, do you have anything to share at this time that you're going to ask the board or want to ask the board for as it pertains to building that pipeline and having the teachers? Because that's where, from my experience, I saw things fall apart in our programs, is that consistency, the support the teachers needed, our job supporting them and finding, recruiting, building that pipeline wasn't there. And that is what leads me to a potential ask, or something that, you might have already planned that you're going to ask us that you will need board approval on. So I'm curious if you have anything concrete to share now on that part. And I think that ties into what James is going for, like what's going to be the ask, if anything.
I would just, before maybe you mentioned, I was just going to say, I think that recruiting teachers is going to be an issue for any school district at any point right now in moving forward, right? That is going to be a big problem for most school districts. I think if you add to that bilingual teachers, absolutely. But at the same time, we know, and when we're talking about voucher schools, the reason that Latino families are moving to a voucher school, it's not any voucher school. A lot of them have moved to St. Thomas More because they're offering bilingual program from 3K through 5th grade, right? And so there is a demand for that kind of a program. And so just wanting to say that we have to kind of weigh in what's the context in which this is happening, because no matter what, I think any school district is going to be looking for, having to invest money to recruit teachers. And when we were looking at this ourselves, we were looking at, grow your own models. We were also looking at trying to offer J-1 visas to families from Latin America coming through. We actually have in the report a list of you might have seen a list of educators, bilingual educators that are very successful programs, and they have a lot of ideas about how to recruit teachers as well.
Yeah, I want to balance the awareness of the resources and the investment of this with the notion that we are intentionally starting or rebooting this very, very small. Growing up one grade at a time. So the actual increase in enrollment in this over time will be more and more families of kindergartners wanting this for their children, because once you're in it, our goal is to keep you in it, not go out and try to recruit second graders arbitrarily to fill up a second grade classroom. So the growth model of this is meant to be focused on incoming kindergartners each year in one school. I'll also just remind the board that we have another two-way program in another school that we're continually looking at and working to improve. And the enhancements that our consultant team is sharing that will be relative to Doty will be things that we can immediately put into practice with our other two-way program as well. So this is not a dramatic change in bilingual programming. It's not as if all of a sudden Green Bay is now offering a two-way program, because we have it and we have had it in other places. We're learning more. We know that we can do better by our students and families, and we're going to put that into practice immediately.
James?
Yes, I hear you, David. I would not suggest that the report that Grazia and Amanda put together stand as our codified, North Star for this program, right? So I guess what I'm asking for is, specifically because you're wanting to grow a program over time, that we create an approved documentation of what that program is, what the governance structures that have been suggested are, and that we agree to them. And that document needs to allow us to, it should survive you, right? We need institutional knowledge, not locked into people and situational documents, but in things that we can refer back to, so that when we have to make decisions, that we make that decision at the appropriate level. And if you're presenting a presentation to the Board of Education, it feels like we should all agree that for the district, that the board wants this program in place and is willing to prioritize it across time in budget conversations and conversations about what that program is. There's engagement. There's a call for more than accommodative translation. And all of those things come at cost and come at resources and things like that. So I know I might be beating a dead horse here, but I really think we should give some thought to formalizing this into something that survives 2-3 years.
And if I can just clarify, our role really with this project was to provide a vision for what this could look like. Our role here tonight is not to tell the district how to implement this or how it should look like in the classroom. We're really relying on district leadership, the board, and the teachers to work towards that next phase, which would be implementation, which I think is what you're speaking to.
And I guess to add to that, Amanda, I think implementation is far beyond just curriculum and far beyond what is happening in the classroom. You're looking for, structured, continual, parental and community engagement and things like that, which, we write charters for committees, right? And we do that work at the board level. So.
Mm-hmm. Laura?
It took me a while, James, but I think I understand what you're saying. It's important, I think, and we forget this sometimes, that we're not all going to be here forever. And so we do need to plan for the future, for a time when these board members are not going to be here. So if we're going to commit resources and time to what is just I think a bold initiative, then taking some steps to elevate it to a I don't know if charter is the right word or not, might be the thing that protects it for the future. It's just something to think about. So I don't really have any questions or anything, but I'm just super excited about this. And I think all eyes are going to be on Doty this fall, and I can't wait to see where this goes. And that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Amanda said, is that this is the very, very first phase, and it's called a visioning phase, and that is what we've presented. So,
Andrew?
Thank you. Slightly different angle, and I just wanted to get a mention of this since it was a part of the presentation. The going from so going from 10.5 to 12% bilingual, how are we defining that across the district? Because there's a number that's far less than the seal. But yeah, so how are we knowing that, or how are we finding that?
Just to make sure I'm clear, you're asking the question about what ultimately defines that a student is multilingual?
Well, there's right, and that's because it's a threshold that is not as strict as the seal, right? Because or are you talking, because right now 10% of graduates aren't getting the seal, right?
The seal is not anywhere near our 12%. Yeah,
Okay,
correct.
so
correct.
Right, so the seal, and I know the seal is right, a formal exam in the partner language and everything.
Right.
So how are we how are we defining how do we know how do we know it's 10 and a half and not 20 already? Because I'm sure there's probably way more than 10 and a half that speak pretty well in two or more languages. So how do we find that out?
The 10 and a half baseline was calculated using that more expanded notion of successfully completing a college level English course as well as a course in world languages and being proficient or being meeting or exceeding the ACT English Language Arts score. So that was a different way. It was like a parallel way of calculating that. The board goal is actually graduates, and so then you also have to shrink it down to the senior class when you look at that number as well. So we'll have an updated goal for the board this fall, as well as numbers after our first year. And I do believe that goal can grow substantially, and that a greater number of students who fall under that category get there because they achieve the seal.
Okay, so I mean, if we're really trying to capture this, there's some scenarios someone could that might be missed under this, but as a person who should very legitimately count as bilingual fluent, you could have someone come from Estonia, speak Estonian, and there might not be a method to click into the percentage, but actually for that person, they might have a path to the seal, because I looked up, there is an Estonian test and that, and among other things. But you would have maybe not, that person might not have a way, as we define it right now, to get into the right, that 12% we're going for, until maybe later they got the seal, and then they would be backfilled into it.
Right, because of the limitations of post-secondary options in a language like Estonian, that would be the challenge. Although our strategic actions around that goal are tied into significant efforts in 5th grade and 8th grade to raise awareness of the seal and the benefits of pursuing that. And so more and more, we would be able to learn of that student early and make sure that they're on a path to complete the seal in a language that is best for them.
And I picked an obscure example to start with on purpose, but I don't know, our 10.5 to 12% goal, are we able to calculate that for Somali right now? Probably not, because there's probably not a course in it, right? So I just want to make sure we might well have quite a bit more than 10. Obviously, some things have to be the measurement, but I just hope we, over time, find a way to capture people who are truly fluent in both languages, because in 2 or more languages, because there's maybe some that we haven't figured out how to count yet. So
I do appreciate that, and I think that's where we could look to larger districts like Milwaukee. When you look at the distribution of the seals earned in that community, so many more languages represented, and so we have a lot that we can learn about making sure we can meet kids where they are.
But the seal, you can, I mean, I looked at the language list for the seal. You can do the test in 167 languages for the seal. It's just that presumably there's some group of people who are maybe legitimately fluent that are not taking the seal, unless the plan is to dramatically ramp up who's taking the seal as well. So, okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much. Appreciate you. All right, we will transition into area 4 for education. Item 4A relates to the annual posting of standards. And I believe this is, David, this is you again. Awesome.
Board, this is an annual requirement that we have to put before you the set of standards that are used for what we would call the academic core: English, language arts, math, science, social studies, and reading. We've added disciplinary literacy standards as well as early childhood standards to this as well. So all of those are current. The standards that we use to build our courses, to adopt our high quality instructional materials, are all aligned with the state of Wisconsin standards in these areas. Upon board approval at the end of this month, these standards will be made public on our website. We refresh that every year as we're obligated to share with the community what standards we teach to.
Any questions or discussion? Laura?
David, I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but do private schools have to do the same thing?
I don't know the answer to that.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. That will move us into operations, and for that, I will yield the chair to Jeanette.
Thank you. So we are going to have a discussion regarding the referendum. And Angie, are you coming up to the table? And who else? Kale, are you going to be at the table too for this, or? Yeah, okay, great.
Good evening. Thumbs up. I got it. Okay, so tonight we are going to, what we're doing tonight is we're bringing forward to the board the question for the operational referendum that we will be asking the community to support in November, at the November. So as we have been discussing for the past several years, we have a $16.5 million operational referendum that is going to be expiring in 26-27, and we will then be asking the community to support to renew that question and renew that operational ask for the next 4 years. So I'm just going to pull up so the official referendum ballot. So we work with Quarles and Brady to draft the question. So this is a draft in board docs. It was posted. This is a draft of the official referendum ballot question. So, right, there's, you know, some language that cannot be changed because of state statute. So if you look at it, it's like, can't we put this into, you know, some of the terms can we remove to make it, you know, seem a little easier to read? We cannot do that because this is the way that it has to be put on the ballot. But what you see here is that the district will be asking for $154 million over a 4-year period of time. It will be a step. So we will be asking for a stepped every 4 years to have a step because we will be asking for what we need in that year. Sometimes you will see a flat amount that's asked. So districts do a variety of both. And this just seems to be the best fit for Green Bay because we want to ask the community and ask for what we actually need for those years based on our projections. So here you see the 4 years, the question, and then Oh, I lost it. But yes, so if, and with this question, we will be going out with, this will be tax, mill rate tax neutral. It will not be an increase to the mill rate for this ask for the next 4 years. I think that's really important. We have always strategically as a district been very fiscally responsible and trying to manage that mill rate to the best of our ability. The operational and the capital referendums are two of those things that we can control. And we have always been, that's always been our strategy, is to try to keep that mill rate as stable as possible. Always can't control everything, but that's definitely been the strategy of the district. Want to also reiterate that an operational referendum is very different than a capital referendum. So we have asked the community to support a capital referendum in 2024. We continue to work on those projects, but capital referendums are only for facilities needs, different than an operational, which will support the operations of the district. So salaries, benefits, utilities, transportation, those types of things. The reason why we are asking for an operational referendum, as we know, we have had a lack in state funding. We have not been receiving inflationary increases for our per pupil funding for the past several years. So our expenditures, with the inflation as it has been for the past several years, our expenditures are now not keeping up or keeping pace with revenues. So that is why we are going out for operational, to close that gap so we can maintain our programs, we can maintain the things that we value here at the district and that we've heard the community value. So then what will happen is, after discussion tonight, this question will then get voted. In 2 weeks, the board will vote, and then we will move forward with, with the referendum materials and going out to the communities and things, talking about the operational ask.
Okay, does anybody, go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you. So how much, how much room is there for discussion? Are these the numbers that as exactly as possible keep the mill rate flat?
These are the amounts that, based on our projections and what we have in the model, these are the amounts that we are asking the community to support to close that gap for the next 4 years.
Okay, so that wasn't my question. Are those numbers needed precisely if we want to have a level mill rate, which we've valued for a long time?
There is room to ask for more from the community without, the mill rate would increase slightly, but this is to keep the mill rate, a few cents lower than, to either decrease or keep it neutral to where we will be in 26, 27, which is about $7.40.
Right. I think keeping it flat is really important. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we necessarily need to decrease it, because then you can run into issues later where something looks like a increase because you have too many peaks and valleys. So that, I guess that was my my question is 27, 35, 43, and 49 exactly matched to when other things drop off, or are there more options in paying certain things quicker or slower and so forth?
So this is based on the best projection, just because we have 2 state budgets. So let's say in 2 years, we get a whole bunch of equalized aid, or we get a large increase in per pupil. So we get another $1,000 per pupil. That naturally is going to raise our levy and raise our mill rate. So then at that point, we would then discuss whether or not, right? I mean, what is needed, what our mill rate looks like. So there are so many factors, and I'm not trying to skirt the question, Andrew, but as of right now, with the projections in place, with the equalized aid rate in place for the next 4 years, to the best of our ability to project, this will keep the mill rate as stable as possible. But again, there are so many things that could change our mill rate in a couple of years that is out of our control as a district. So this is, right? This is the best guess, the best estimate that we have with the amount of information that we have up to this point.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
James, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So, Angie, reading the question, I just want to make sure that I fully understand the definition of the word by. So we're asking for permission to exceed the limit, the revenue limit by 27 million, right? And then it goes up from there. The definition of the word by is actually up to. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
So up to 27 million. Yes.
So we can decide on an annual basis, given your presentation, and the words that you just said, right? If we get a bunch of equalized aid and our situation ameliorates over, based on some legislative action, we don't have to levy the amounts that are actually in the question, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So up to those amounts.
Yeah,
You are correct.
So when I look at this, and Andrew, I think the question that we need to ask, and as a board, what I think would get to your point is, it's my understanding that your projections account for the known amount of additional limits, right? The 325 that's been codified into the budget. We don't, and you plan for a certain amount of equalized aid in association with that. And then you planned for a 3% cost of living increase across time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So, so the question I have is, how conservative is 3% as a cost of living projection across time? Because ultimately, I think we benefited from a little bit of positive economic movement last year, but this year doesn't feel like it's following the same trend. And I think there's a lot more inflationary pressure that we see in coming in the news. So is it a conversation the board can have whether or not 3% is the right forecasted number, or do you feel super confident that that's what we should bake into the number?
I think so. As far as inflationary costs for benefits, right? So that includes health benefits, that includes salaries. I think that, so for example, a few years ago, we had an 8%, 8% inflationary. No one would be able to, right? We would have never guessed that it was going to hit 8%. So 3%, right? I mean, I guess it's based on, right, we could do 4%, we could do 5%, but as we look at those numbers, we just have to be able to have conversations. If all of a sudden inflation goes to 8%, what does that look like? Because, right, if it's not sustainable, then we're going to have those hard conversations. So 3% across the board for benefits and salaries, right? That's the number that, others have used in surrounding districts. Yeah, I mean, it's at the board discretion if you want to increase the amount that we're asking for the community. But this is based on the projections, and this is the recommendation that we're bringing forward.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, James and Andrew, because I've been a part of kind of some conversations with maybe the potentially same thought process and or concern, which is, one, we want to be good stewards of our money and make sure we're not asking for more than we need, but we also have a lot of chaotic things in the environment we're working within. And if we can still make sure we get what we need and maybe have a little bit more of not relying on, the best case scenario, let's call it, while also still maintaining a zero increase in taxes to any of our district residents. That's what we surveyed on. That's what we asked them for. That's what we got our feedback on. And most people generally are okay and understand the situation we're within, especially if it does not mean an increase in their taxes. So I appreciate those questions. I'm kind of the same thought process, that and I don't know a way to put this, but maybe we need to consider, if we haven't done it already, understanding exactly what, B, C, and D would look like at certain inflationary numbers, keeping everything else the same, while also making sure we're not increasing taxes, which again is what we asked the community to give us feedback on so far.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Sam.
Just to clarify in all of your projections on this is with the understanding that we are continuing to right size our staffing. We're continuing to make sure that we're being, appropriate with our fund here, that we're not, just relying on all of this. This assumes some continued cuts along the line. Correct?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
So still right sizing, right? We're still declining in enrollment, so we will continue to right size, staff through attrition like we have been doing for the last few years. So yes, those conversations will still be happening during the course of the 4 years. We also have to be mindful of, right, this 4 years will set us up for the next 4 years, because if funding doesn't change at the state level, then we will have to come back to the community in 4 years. So we have to be very mindful of what we're going out there for, right? And getting the support, and then looking at the future in 4 years. If something doesn't change, what is that ask going to be in 4 years from now? So we have to not only be thinking of this 4 years, but we definitely have to be looking at the future, because right? Again, I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. But right, like looking into the future, because if funding, right, if funding doesn't change, we're coming back. So we got to be mindful of that.
Okay, I have a few questions. So I would like you to clarify, you said we haven't had an increase with inflation for several years. Can you clarify when the last time we had an inflationary increase was? How many years has it been? I know the answer to that, but I want everybody else, including the people who may be listening, I want them to understand how long it has been. And then I want them to think about how they would be in their roles as parents or business owners, et cetera, if they didn't have increases in line with inflation.
Yep. So we have to be careful. So when we say no inflationary increases, we have received increases from the state. Okay. So for the past 17 years, though, it has not kept up with inflation. So for example, a couple of years ago, we received $1,000, and then we received $325. So now we have that $325 in the model at a flat rate. So you're not seeing any inflationary increase. So to your point, so the last 17 years, it hasn't kept up with inflation. Had we been receiving inflationary increases like we did prior to that 17 years, I believe it stopped in the recession, we would have approximately $3,000 more per pupil. So in 26-27, we will be receiving $11,650 per pupil. That would be $3,000 more per pupil, which alone last year would have equated to about $60 million. I also want to keep everybody's kind of head and wrapped around the numbers. So when you look at the numbers for this question, right, 154 million across 4 years, that first year being 27 million, you have to keep in mind that we're talking about a budget. An operating budget for Green Bay is approximately, with Fund 10 and Fund 27, approximately $375–400 million. So, right, it's a big number, but when you're talking about a $400 million budget, you just have to keep that in mind, because it's really hard to relate to that when we don't deal with those kind of numbers at home.
Go ahead, Sam.
Just to clarify really quick, the question listed here does not have that $154 million in there at all. Is that accurate? Then that total will not be on there. It'll just be the incremental stair steps.
Yep.
Okay.
That's how the question needs to be written. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, so I did have another question. So, we have to keep in mind, and I think inflation is going to be far worse than 3%. I came of age in the 70s, and for the few people in this room who came of age in the 70s, they probably remember mortgage rates at 15 and 16%. And inflation was really a lot higher than 3%. And so I can imagine that that may occur and we may be facing some issues. But if we try to even go to a 4 or 5% inflation, that's going to cause us to have to increase our mill rate, which will increase people's taxes. And we know that people don't want their taxes increased. If we do not get this referendum passed, what does that mean? What does that look like?
If the referendum doesn't pass, we're obviously going to have to start looking at the things that the community values, programming, class size, right? Things that we have heard the community want to keep. We do wonderful things. We offer our students great things. So those are the things, right? Staffing. We have been fortunate enough to plan. Like we have talked about, we had the ESSER years. So we had 3 years to plan on how we were going to consolidate 6 schools, right? That would probably be accelerated. Some of those, right? Some of those topics that we've talked about for, the past several years, so that there could potentially be more of consolidation, boundary changes, things of that nature. It would just speed things up a bit.
Thank you. I hope that people are listening to that when they make their decision in November. So, James, go ahead.
Yeah, so I know that in order to pass this referendum and to do our fiduciary job or be responsible to the community, we have to ask for what we need. And my only issue is this is all run on projections, right? And I like Jeanette have a personal perspective that is not founded in any kind of economic model that 3% is probably a conservative number. But I'm not the person to provide that number, and I understand that. So if we go with this 3% projection, and we say that based on the models that we have, and we've had expert advice provided, and this is what we should put out there. When we run up against a miscalculation, right? We're right back here talking about budget cuts and how we're going to impact programming out there. So this is really the expectation is the state provided aid increases over time, covers a portion of those cost of living increases. And we are, projecting that our increase by 3% is necessary to cover the remaining of what we think that those cost of living increases are. I I want to know, I guess, what activity is there, could be done over the next 2 weeks, to help us as a board grow comfortable or more comfortable with these numbers. I heard Alex say, "Hey, let's model a couple of different percentages out there." I am not an advocate for not an arbitrary number, but like for a flat number increase year over year. I think it has to be defensible and pinned to something. So if it's a projection of cost of living, great. But is there, Angie, could you see putting together a 3.5 and a 4, and so that we can come and to Jeanette's point, say, yes, we can do this, and here's the impact, A, on the flat dollar amounts that have to go into the question, because we know that once we get above $50 million, we think that we're going to lose a portion of the support just because that number, crosses a psychological barrier for some. Um, so if we could just create some facts around a couple different models so that we can um, decide the question.
So James, I just want to make sure I've got this. So you want me to create a model? So you want 3.5% for the next 4 years, 4% for the next 4 years, and then take a look at what it does to the mill rate?
Well, yeah, well, two things. What it does to the question, right? Because that's going to inflate these numbers in the question, and yes, the impact to mill rate, and or our ability to pay off debt, right, over time. So is that and so Superintendent Hernandez, I know that looping you in, this is your resource, right? I am just trying to make sure that the board has um, enough information to take this decision.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming in. I actually asked if I could say something before this. So I'm going to sort of answer some of your question. Obviously, this is my first board meeting, but I've had my eye on Green Bay for a while, and I also was aware of the funding cliff that was coming through. And so part of the due diligence was if you have a funding cliff coming through, you want to look through to see what the CFO has done in the past. And one thing that I was extremely impressed with in speaking with individuals in the education world was how accurate your projections have been over the last, several years, I guess. So that's just something that I appreciate when we're looking through whether it's conservative or not. If you look at the past few years, they've pretty much been spot on. The other part of this is, it pains me, and I'm aware of a lot of districts right now are having these conversations tonight or this or next week as we're coming close to the deadlines to put the question together. Is part of the other conversation is we know that the funding model is broken. We know right now that it's at the peril of our children. And I appreciate everybody's advocacy here because at the end of the day, it's for opportunities for our students. Um, I would hope that our community is hearing this as well to use their voice when they vote, whatever they choose to vote for this referendum, but as well as just voting for the future of our educational system, and the funding model to that as well. If we did look at 3.5 or 4.0, I understand the ask why. I just hope that we're able then to let our community know why we're making that adjustment when we asked their opinion. And then we saw what they said. I'm concerned that we ask for a little bit more, because if the funding model isn't fixed, we're going to be asking again in 2 years, and then we're going to be asking again in 2 additional years. And with that, eventually that hand is going to be turned away. So I would like us to remain fiscally responsible as well as community-based.
So Angie, I put those two numbers out off the top of my head, and I don't want you to take them away as like, yeah, do this. I think that 4 will be an increase that I don't know that would be worth discussing. I think that a 1% increase would be, pretty significant across the board, and I don't know that anyone at the table thinks that we're way off, right? So even if it's like 3.25, 3.5 or something like that, just to see what, um, and board, please, I don't want to be the person, directing this, activity if other people have differences of opinion.
So I'll be interested to see those numbers too. Just something else to kind of consider. But something you said earlier, Angie, that's kind of is what we're all grappling with constantly, you more than anybody, as you try to shepherd us through some pretty financially treacherous times, is things that are out of our control. Like we can talk all day about projections and but the truth is that the political instability is very much at play in this, and I don't see an end to that anytime soon. And so how do we move forward in a time where we cannot control a lot of what influences these decisions, and we're just citizens trying to do our best to use taxpayer dollars wisely and to do what's best for our kids. So like I said, I'll be interested to see maybe another version just to be able to kind of put them side by side. But I also think that you and your team and various other staff have done an awesome job helping us through, I don't know how many referendum cycles I've been through now on the board, at least 3, I guess. We're all heading into that as a board. We're going to have to go out to the community, all of us, and talk about this in a way that citizens that elected us can see that that our intentions are good and that we're really driven by just only what is going to benefit our district and therefore our children and our staff. So it's going to be an interesting few months, and it's going to be intense, and we're going to all have to gear up and get in the right mindset to inform the public about what's at stake, which is a lot.
I did want to mention one thing. I know the focus had been on cost of living increase, but the board knows this, but for those listening tonight too, a lot of that inflationary pressure, our utilities, our transportation, benefits, insurance, things like that too, that's also baked into that deficit that we're facing. So while the focus has been a lot on that tonight, I just wanted to remind everyone, we also have the pressures in commodities and things like that that are driving up costs for us as well.
Yeah, so some of those, so just the 3%, that's really just for, salaries. Benefits is a little bit more. We have a transportation contract coming up in 2 years, so that is more than the 3%. So those are also baked in. So it's not a 3% across the board. We have, right, our software contracts go up more than 3% every year. So that's also in the model. So we have accounted for all of that. The 3% is really just based on the salaries and benefits.
Yeah.
I agree with, looking at 3.25, 3.5, rather than jumping all the way to 4. I think that full percent. But when you talk about benefits going up, there was a small business owner that I heard talking that his employees' benefits went up 40% this year. We're not going to be able to control that. Those are things that we're just going to have to say, gosh, it wasn't incompetence. Because I definitely agree with Superintendent Hernandez. You're doing a great job. And I'd like to borrow your crystal ball.
Yeah, right.
But I think Laura.
Anyone's
you
got an
something?
extra one, I'll take it.
So every month we get you guys give us the rundown of bills, money going in, money coming out, and for some reason, this one item always sticks with me, which is insurance. I think we average about $5 million a month. Sometimes it's a little less, sometimes a little more. I don't know how accurate that is, but my impression is for our district, we spend about $5 million a month on insurance. And I'm sure that's various kinds of insurance, right? I mean, that's a shocking number. But it's necessary. You can't run a school district without insurance. So, the numbers that we're talking about are so big that I know that sometimes people are just amazed at them and they're scary. And they scare me too sometimes. but that doesn't mean doesn't mean we can ignore the reality of what it costs to run a district our size and to run it well. So anyway, that's all.
Thank you. And I just want to reiterate, to the public that I think some of us who have spoken, myself in particular, the whole goal is to make sure to be as, conservative with the entire community's money as possible, while also still making sure that we get what we need for all of our kids and all of our programs, knowing that history, the trend right now is for everything to not go our way with what's happening with all of the things we've just listed. And we would not be doing everyone and all of our kids due diligence without considering at least what the other numbers and options look like, especially within the range of not increasing taxes and making sure that we're still properly accounting for all these what ifs that recently and likely still odds wise are not going to go in our favor. And the last thing we want to have to do is cut teachers, cut benefits, raise insurance again, cut programs, close more schools. And if we can look at very subtle adjustments that, yeah, they might change an overall figure on a piece of paper, don't, directly, immediately, and or in any significant way affect anybody's pocketbooks, but still make sure we're not, again, back here in 2 years or unfortunately, miscalculated anything to no fault of our own. That's an important thing that we do.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, then I think we can move forward to 5B, 2026-27 revisions to district organizational chart.
Thank you. Yes, I'll be reviewing the org chart shifts. There are three shifts that we have made. The first one falls underneath David John's supervision, in which we are adjusting the titles or the director of school leadership from leveled to that they'll be working with different cohorts. We are also downsizing from 4 positions to 3 with Miss Olson retiring. Second shift is under Mike Freeze with Human Resources, and we adjusted their titles, Miss Vang and Miss Sela, in which they are now just the directors of Human Resources, in which they will be collaborative through their work within HR. And the last shift in the org chart, Miss Ingrid Parker Hill as the Director of Engagement. She was in a direct report to the former superintendent. She is transitioning to work with the Director of Communications, or Miss Blakesley.
Any questions? Okay, then we can move on to 5C, job description updates. Is that also you? That's Mike Freeze, different Mike.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to connect with some additional job description updates. A few of them were just referenced by Superintendent Hernandez. And I've got Associate Superintendent David Johns at the table with me as well, because a number of them are connected to areas that he ultimately oversees. He can speak more specifically, perhaps answer any questions that you may have. So the first one, again, referenced that the Director of School Leadership is primarily a title change. David, I think there's a few other just minor tweaks that have been listed as well. Anything that you wanted to add or any questions anybody has about that?
This change also is in response to moving from 4 to 3 directors in this role and recognizing that the old distinction of elementary and secondary doesn't really work as well. When we have K-8 schools, we have 6-12 charter schools. And so it's really meant to be quite generic so that the portfolio of schools that those 3 leaders support can be a best fit for where their skill set is and what the schools need.
Any questions?
Second position listed falls under the Department of Pupil Services. Actually, the next three would fall under that. We've got a proposal for a position that is titled Student Success Coach. We also have revisions to the school social worker and school counselor job descriptions that are reflective of the fact that they haven't been looked at in a number of years, and they wanted to make sure they were still appropriate for the modern school environment. And so they've got some changes they've recommended for that. So the student success coach, if you'd like to speak a little bit to that, David, I'd appreciate that.
I will. This is a role that does not have a red line because it's a new position. It is a position being proposed to begin first at East High School and Southwest High School in a critical role of supporting small groups of students who data indicates that they're falling off track for graduation metrics early. Engage with students, staff, families, other support staff to provide pretty immediate intervention-based support, and then continue to support other students as students find their path.
Go ahead, Alex.
I just want to say for those who are either listening closely or not listening closely enough, just to clarify, some of the public has asked for us to reduce, people in district level administrative roles. So I just want to point out that we have done that by going from 4 to 3. And on the flip side, this is a new position, but it's changing out a different position that we had. It's not a new position that we've added to the district or added to the district budget. So.
Any other questions? Thank you for that clarification, Alex. That's important. Okay, go ahead.
And then the final position, again, is just as articulated, no budgetary impact, is simply a broadening and deepening of the responsibilities that our directors and human resources have. As we've consolidated over the years and have reduced FTE, we've asked them to have a broader knowledge base and be able to supervise more people and address multiple areas of the department. And we felt that it was appropriate to reduce the specificity within the department and say you're a director of human resources, and because they are serving frankly broadly in that role. And so we've kind of recommended that we have a draft modern, this is a director of human resources. We have 2 people serving in those capacities covering the responsibilities in the department.
Any questions about that? Okay, great. And if you don't have anything else, I think that wraps up operations.
All right. Next up, we will be moving into policy and governance. I believe Mary is going to facilitate that portion of our meeting.
Okay, so under policy and governance, we have 5 sections here. The first one is 6A, Dependents Hearing Officer Resolution for Expulsion.
So this is also an annual presentation that we make for an authorization of using an independent hearing officer for expulsion hearings. We started this when the revisions to Title IX came into effect because the individual who makes the decisions has to be trained in Title IX decision-making. The 2 individuals who currently serve as our independent hearing officers, Danielle Karn and Dean Dietrich, have agreed to continue to serve as our independent hearing officers.
Any discussions, questions? Andrew?
So annually, since we started doing this, I vote no on this, and I'll vote no on it again. It's philosophical. I'm not pretending that we have a good practical way to get enough board members to the meetings without pushing things pretty far with scheduling, but ultimately it falls under the category of one of the things that my rule of not voting yes if I'm not 85% sure. I'm a little under that still. That could change someday, but I don't think the people picked are wrong. I think the people picked are great, but it's it's philosophical that I think it should be easier for, ideally, it should be easier for people to come directly to their elected officials at that point of expulsion.
Jeanette?
I think these, and correct me if I'm wrong, these hearings are in the middle of the day. And I know that several people here on this board do not have the ability to do things often in the middle of the day because they have other employment that they're working on. And this would involve some significant training, and these people we're hiring have been doing this for a while. So I think rather than saying that the families and the students would benefit from coming to their elected officials, yes, I don't disagree with you on that, Andrew, except I think that the people we're hiring have far better skills in making these decisions. And that way the students and the families are better served. So I support this.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? Alex?
I guess I'll just make it quick, just to throw it out there. I share, especially as someone who worked in the district for a very long time in our schools and, been with a lot of the students, who maybe had some struggles, that I philosophically feel the same way as Andrew, that yes, this is part of the board responsibility, but at the same time, logistically, functionally, two things. One, this is a much more, succinct, efficient way for kids and families to have the process not be hung up forever because of logistics. And simultaneously, at the end of the day, of course, we are still making the decision. We are still reviewing the case, and we still have the ultimate role to play in it. So even though philosophically I still have the same stance, logistically, I think it does more for us. So that's why I'll still support it.
Anyone else? Okay, if nobody has any comments or questions, move on to the next one. Will be 6B, revisions to Board of Education Policy 353, Community Instructional Opportunities and Resources.
Mary, can we do 6B and 6C because they're the policy and the rule together?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Tonight, we are bringing forward revisions to our policy that affects community instructional opportunities and resources in our schools. Earlier this year, the legislature and the governor signed into law Wisconsin Statute 118.065, which provides that any of the 5 organizations that I've listed, Big Brothers Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Club of America, Scouting America, which is formerly known as Boy Scouts of America, Girl Scouts of the United States of America, and the National FFA organization, be given an opportunity to provide information about their organization to students on school property during the school day. The language of the statute was originally written to require that they be given an opportunity, and the language that passed said that a school can permit them to have an opportunity to provide that information during the school day. The intersection of this with the Boy Scouts of America Act that requires districts to provide equal opportunities to organizations such as the Boy Scouts, and there's a few other organizations listed in that federal law, caused us to have to pause and say, what are we going to equitably use as the determination for allowing outside organizations to come in during the school day to present to students, and who makes that decision, and what does that look like? So those would be the revisions that are included in the policy and the rule with respect to allowing organizations in during the instructional day.
Sam?
Is there a specific reason why those 5 orgs were not just listed in here? Is it just because it is a fluid in nature, like that we aren't specifically listing those organizations in the policy and instead leaving it more general?
Because we're going to apply the same criteria to every organization.
Okay. Thank you.
Laura?
I'm not actually sure you're the right person to ask this question, but what's the process if an organization any organization wants to come and access our students? to give them information or, yeah, let's leave it at that.
That usually starts with a request to Amy Fish's office, and Amy works within the facility use policy as well as our policy on this opportunity, as well as outside organizations meeting with students during the school day to meet with students.
So they start with Amy, and this is your guiding policy for, okay. Thank you.
Alex?
Does this change anything for teachers when it comes to curriculum, you know, and bringing in guest speakers for things that typically have? Does it change any of their processes or anything?
No, the policy mentions that guest speakers are still fall under the other policy for guest speakers.
Anyone else? Comments, questions?
Okay.
Oh, James.
Yeah. So Melissa, by changing the statute from required to permit, but leaving the enumeration of organizations, is there any sensitivity to those organizations at all? But it feels like by changing that one word, right, we've taken the correct position that, well, I can permit any organization and we should have that policy in place for anything. Why did they leave the enumeration of organizations in the law if we changed it to permit?
I don't know the answer to that, but the intersection of this with the Boy Scouts of America Act, where you have to treat the Boy Scouts equally as you do all other groups, is the suggestion to have a policy in place as to what your criteria are so that you are appropriately and equitably treating all organizations. So now here's our criteria. If a request is made, because these organizations are going to know that this new law exists and they may request to come in and meet with students and provide information. So now here's our criteria that we're going to use when a request is made.
Laura? Oh, Deb.
So just so I understand the hierarchy here, there's a federal law. And then as we get closer to our individual district, obviously we're guided by that federal law too, but but the way this policy seems to be saying, at least from what I can tell, and I could be wrong on this, we have a fair amount of leeway as to who we allow in our schools and have to have access to our kids.
With respect to meeting with students during the school day, during the instructional day, correct?
Right. Okay, thank you.
Andrew?
I think probably the most likely answer to why there would be 5 names that would be retained in the bill, but then not actually required and just say can, is that way one could say that they have voted for something that supports and mentions all 5 organizations, and also someone could turn right around to someone who didn't like any one organization to be favored. Oh, I didn't vote for anything that favored it. So it's just a nice have your cake and eat it too.
Anyone else? Okay, if not, then we'll move on to 6D and E, revisions of board policy 363.2 and 363.22.
Responsible use policy. Last month, I brought to you policy 522.6, dealing with staff communications with students. That was the result of the adoption of Acts 88 and 89. Our responsible use policy, and specifically Rule 2 of the responsible use policy, addresses staff and student communications as well. So these are just some additional language that's introduced into the policy and the rule that will bring this in line with policy 522.6 and Acts 88 and 89.
Any questions, comments? Andrew?
Thank you. Okay, I'm looking at the let's see, I'm on the policy 363.2. And in the red line section, which is really mostly just number 7, 7A is staff are prohibited from using personal electronic accounts, social media accounts, messaging applications, or personal phone number for district related communications with students. So does that, I guess, as written, that would wipe out even the, like a group text among a whole team if the coach doesn't have a district cell phone, right?
There are a number of apps that coaches can use, and Lori is working with Tim Flood to identify district approved apps. Right now, and those messages come through your district email or your Zoom phone through those apps, through that texting message. We have students and coaches across the district using a number of various ones. SportsU, Game Changer, the list goes on and on and on. If your kids are in sports, you've probably used all of them. So we want to make sure, one, we have to make sure that they're ADA compliant going forward. 2, we want to make sure that they are sensitive to multiple languages going forward. And 3, we want to make sure that they're approved district resources so that they are approved under Acts 88 and 89. And we know that we have to meet our students where they are, and that's by text messaging. So that's the solution to that, Andrew.
Okay, I just want to, this has to be something then if it's rolling out I think a reasonable person might think that a group text that includes parents and students probably is fine. I don't want this to be on a list of things that someone's in trouble for. And I would think this would need some time to be rolled out and to be known widely. And I don't, I get that you don't want to have a direct texting to kids, but I don't know that everyone knows about these apps, and I don't know if it's summer. I don't know there's enough time to roll this out.
Well, the law already went into effect, so we have to implement, and this is required by the law. You cannot use your district cell phone to text kids, so that's what's required under Acts 88 and 89. We are required by the statute to do training. So we will be doing training probably through the DPI module when that gets released in the fall. In addition to that, we are training our administrators. We have included this in the staff scoop, and we're doing a number of different communication platforms to make sure that staff are aware of the new statutory requirements. So it's more about education than punishment, Andrew.
Okay, Alex?
So just to clarify, because I think you accidentally misspoke the last time you just said this, you're saying staff are not supposed to use their personal device. However, you mentioned about using apps and things like that. Is that then kind of, I don't know what the right word, superseded or null and void? Because obviously you're not giving, coaches a separate district cell phone. It's basically as long as they can use their cell phone, then at that point, as long as you're using a district approved app to communicate, correct?
Yes, because you create accounts with your district approved Zoom phone number as well as your district approved email address. And so those messages are archived then in that way. I'm sorry.
Anyone else? Sam?
And just to clarify, these obviously then are applying to the same exemptions and things that are in the 522 communications policy.
Correct. If you're a family friend, correct. You're a family friend, you've had a relationship, your aunt, your uncle, those sorts of things.
Anyone else? Otherwise, I do have a question or two. So reading this, and I know that we have some kiddos in our district that are not exactly proficient in reading, and sometimes it's best for them to communicate verbally. How can we get that to be something that's communicated in a better format? I know that the applications for SportsU and some of those other ones, they don't have calling capabilities. It's just more text. It's more so text than anything. if there is not a way for those applications to have a possible call features, how can we make that work if it's not during like a school like day or school event?
Mary, I can answer a little bit of that. My previous role, I oversaw the athletics and activities for the high schools. And I know that I'm going to be speaking with our activities directors here, is the way that we worked around that is that typically that whether it's the activities or the coaches, they have or whatever captains or whoever might be in charge, and then they have instituted a phone tree of is in which they, all right, you make sure you contact these students, similar to when they have captain practices. They reach out and call people, so it's very also sensitive to language as well. And that's where they also then set up the car rides and all of those. So there's ways that we can get around that component in which they're able to the captains help organize that.
And if I can just add, you can absolutely use your Zoom phone, and your Zoom phone you can do with your computer at home. So as long as you're using your district approved device, you can still have those phone calls. It's your personal cell phone that you're not supposed to be using.
Alex?
So I just randomly thought, so what about, so our coaches now who are not district employees otherwise than getting devices?
That I don't believe is taking place.
Cause that's the only thing I was just thinking of is, in a lot of ways, long gone are the days where pretty much all the coaches practically are, district employees and teachers and stuff like that. Whatever the number is, it doesn't matter. There's always going to be some that are not district employees, in another fashion, and therefore we might have to have a solution for that then, however that may be.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a learning curve this year as to how coaches are going to work through these statutory requirements. And Tim is prepared to meet with all of those coaches and the athletic directors.
Anything else? Anyone comments, questions? Okay, looks like that's all for the governance and policy section.
All right, that brings us to the end of our agenda, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn into closed session. Laura, would you read that?
I move that the board convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985, Parent 1, D, to consider strategies for crime detection or prevention, to wit, to review school safety analysis and discuss sensitive school safety protocols and revisions to same.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All right. Do we voice vote or is all in favor? All right, Kinsey.
Becker,
Aye.
McCoy, Lyerly,
Aye.
Aye.
Minnow,
Aye.
Minnow,
Aye.
Knill,
Aye.
Meister,
Aye.
Yang.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned into closed session. We will take a 5-minute break, board members, so into closed session about 5 minutes.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, for more information on the district and future meeting dates. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.